Welcome to Leading for Life Stories Season 4. I'm Bob Judson. I'm the host for this podcast, and thank you very, very much indeed for joining me. Whether you're a new joiner or a seasoned listener, then I really, really hope you enjoy the mix of content that we provide. The personal stories, the thematic episodes, and of course, the fantastic guest interviews. If you've been with me since the beginning, then I'm enormously grateful for your loyalty and thank you so much. If you're relatively new to the show, then I really hope you like it, and I hope you find all of it interesting and some of it hopefully useful to you. Please subscribe on whichever channel it is you're using, whether it's YouTube, whether it's a podcast platform. That really helps us boost the show and get it over the hills on the algorithms. So if you can do that for me, I would be enormously grateful. But without further ado, let's go. Welcome back, everybody. My guest this week is Matthew Scullion. Matthew is a tech guy. He's a serial entrepreneur, having founded his first company when he was a youngster. And he's gone on to be the CEO and co-founder of Matillion, a software company that is now a unicorn. So $1 billion valuation, very, very successful, continuing to grow with some amazing products and very much focused around the AI kind of world as well these days. So we had a great conversation because it's such an area of interest for pretty much everyone in terms of AI and growth of AI. Where's it going? What's it doing? What kind of capability is out there? And Matthew's also got a whole load of other interesting tips and thoughts because he's leading a big company. He's he's set it up pretty much himself, and and has been working on this for a very long period of time. So unsurprisingly, it was a really, really fascinating discussion that I absolutely loved, and I really hope you do too. And without further ado, let's go. Matthew, welcome to the podcast. I am so delighted to have you on the show. It's going to be a fascinating conversation. Really look forward to it.
I hope so, Bob, but I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for having me as part of it.
Not at all. No, I mean, you've had an incredible career already in terms of the stuff you've done, and you're working in an area around software and AI in particular that I think we're going to talk a lot more about, but is one of the most talked about areas in the industry. So that's what makes me think it's going to be really, really interesting as a conversation. But before we get to that, just to kind of get the listeners and viewers a little bit more aware of you, can you just give us a bit of your story so far?
Yeah, in terms of my career and
how you've got to where you've got to. What's your journey been like?
Sure. Yeah. Well, maybe if I start of what I do today, because I think that's probably the thing that if I'm known at all, Bob, I'm best known for. So currently, I'm a co-founder and the CEO of a technology company called Matillion, and we make a platform called Maya, which is an AI data automation platform, Bob. And if necessary, we can talk about that later. But we're a UK-based global software company, and I think even that line's a little bit unusual. There are other ones, but there aren't hundreds of them. Headquartered in Manchester, UK, which is where I'm from, so I'm very proud about that. And yeah, we're a decent sized company nowadays, 400 or 500 team members, HQ locations in Manchester, as I mentioned, Denver, and also Hyderabad, India. About 100 million in revenue, growing nicely, profitable. Raised a bunch of capital. Byproducts of that is one of those unicorns. So yeah, that's what I'm kind of most associated with today, and that's built off really a lifelong career in software and technology. And so rather embarrassingly, I think, Bob, I did my first startup when I was 17 years old. I was meant to be studying harder for my A-levels at the time, but I co-founded a tech startup in the late 90s. In that one, another guy was the CEO and founder, and I was the CTO and co-founder. So we did that for a few years, then I worked in industry for a bit, and then I set up Matillion. And then outside of my life running Matillion, I'm very lucky to be a board member at Manchester University, which is something I really enjoy and really proud of. I serve on the Capital Markets Industry Task Force, which is a Treasury-appointed task force to answer the exam question of how Britain gets better at starting, growing, scaling, and keeping consequential companies. And then, yeah, a few other things around and about that. Dad and a husband as well. So that's me.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's a great starter. And actually, I've very impressive to found a company that young. I have had one interviewee who beats you though. She started the company when she was 12.
Good on her.
Which is she's in education actually. There's a lady called Onyinye Odokporo who's incredibly entrepreneurial, and and I was just blown away that you can even I didn't even know what a company was when I was 12. I don't think so. It's
Me
just
neither. Me neither.
it's bizarre. But no, really fascinating story, and we'll get more into the detail of what you're doing right now in a while for sure. But early motivations, I mean, what kind of took you into that IT and technology space to start off with? What was your driver?
Yeah, for me, funnily enough, it was actually never about the technology. It was about the business. Um, and I don't know why I always wanted to be a businessman when I grew up, Bob, but I think I did. And, I remember being front of the queue of wanting to do youth enterprise at school. And I think maybe part of it was my dad was ostensibly a business guy. Now, actually, he was a sales guy that sold rivets and sticky tape. But he went to work in a suit and wore a tie and had business meetings and carried a briefcase. And maybe that was partially what inspired me to want to be in business. But technology was more the application of that desire to be in business, really. Funnily enough, when I was a kid, I wasn't like super geeky. We didn't have a computer at home, and I liked computers, but I don't know. I probably wasn't good enough to qualify as a full-on super geek in terms of engineering. But yeah, for me, it was a desire to work in business. And if you map that forward a little bit, first of all, um, technology companies have scaling dynamics associated with them that are different in other industries. You can build a technology company that changes the world much more quickly than you can build something that requires factories or metal presses or the development of drugs and things. But even at a micro level, because I know that now, I didn't know that when I was younger, just delivering one solution or one use case or one bit of technology or one product for a customer, be that an internal customer, if you work at a company and you're delivering IT solutions to them, or to a customer that's engaging with your company if you run a technology business, it is a really magical feeling. It's genuinely creative. You are making something that didn't exist before, figuring out everything that needs to do for the customer, and then giving it to them. And if you do that right, their life gets better. And that's a really magical feeling. And then the last thing, you were kind enough to tease ahead of our podcast today some of the sorts of things that you might ask me, and I was trying to be as introspective as possible on some of them. You're like, what were the motivations? I think a little bit of a motivation for me as well was kind of this doesn't sound cheesy, Bob, but it was like wanting a better life.
Hmm.
So I was brought up in like the cheap seats of a nice area. And so my entire upbringing was like of families that were, that I thought, wow, that looks nice, and I'd really like to kick out of my swim lane into another one. And so business and technology and entrepreneurialism, perhaps subconsciously, were a way of doing that, a way of swapping swim lanes in life, which sounds really shallow as I say it, but I think that might have been a key motivation for
No,
me.
I don't think it is. I think having drive, passion, and belief in doing that, and particularly obviously as you say, your passion shines through in terms of giving your customers the best possible experience, etc. With what you do, and that's a great purpose. I mean, it's a fantastic thing to do. I think the other interesting thing, just picking up on what you said there about factories and your ability to make progress really quickly because you don't have to build loads of stuff to be able to build stuff. It also presumably gives you a lot of agility because you can shift emphasis and gears much more quickly than if you had a lot of heavy industry kind of associated with what you're doing. You're not in that space at all, right?
100%. Both the ability and also the requirement, because so does everybody else in the technology industry. I mean, if we talk about the opportunity, and this is something in later life I've become really passionate about. If you go back to, say, the 1980s and look at the average disposable incomes and the quality of life and the purchasing power parity of GDP per head of capita, the US and the UK are pretty similar. Whereas now, US families are materially better off than UK families. And the single biggest reason why is because the US got so good at taming and scaling the technology industry. You can just create very big companies that create a lot of value and wealth with technology in a way that you can't with traditional industries. So I see high growth technology business building, to be honest, as a cause for good, and something that if we were better at here in the UK, then we could have that many more police officers and doctors and nurses, and that many fewer potholes in our roads. And so that's part of the reason why I spend a little bit of my time that I'm not running the company, trying to encourage both the overall system of UK PLC, plus in a couple of other special areas like at the university. And I also help with a thing called Hyperscale CEO, which trains CEOs on high growth business building. These are all because I feel that potential of high growth technology companies to make the world a better place, make the UK a better place, which is the thing I care most about, I suppose, is something that we could get better at and would make a positive difference. But going back to the businesses themselves, there is an ability to pivot, an ability to be agile, but also a need. And I sometimes think that, and this might be kind of an arrogant thing to say, and I hate arrogance, so I hope not. But the software industry is so fast that I almost think that, in a next act of my life sometime, maybe I'll go and apply some of what I've learned in the technology industry to some industry that isn't technology, because it'll seem like shooting fish in a barrel. Because not only do we as a company have the ability to pivot and innovate and be doing something new next quarter that we weren't last, so does everybody else in the world. And it makes it just an incredibly fast moving and an incredibly competitive industry.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And at the other end of that, as the consumer, I mean, I can remember for years, I jumped on the kind of computer bandwagon reasonably early, not as a kind of technology geek, but just as a user.
Sure.
So when I was still in the Air Force, I had a 486 computer when we were still using 386s on the squadron. So,
Nice.
but when you look at it now, it was a tiny little laptop with a really small little black and white screen and was, zero capability really. And I started out with a Commodore Amiga, before that, which was just that kind of even further back down the pipe. And even at that stage, so we're talking, 30 odd years ago, then you were very, very conscious that you bought something and you didn't want to buy another copy of Computer Shopper for a while, because a week later, what you just paid a load of money for is now, significantly lower in price, etc., and obviously higher in capability. And I think that is one of the amazing things about particularly the computing industry and technology generally, is just the sheer pace and capability of it moving on. And for youngsters now, of course, who there's a hilarious YouTube clip, isn't there, where you actually you ask a group of youngsters to turn around and dial a phone number on an old style phone with a rotary dial, and they don't know how to do it. They can't work out how to do it because they don't recognize you've actually got to let it go all the way back to zero, having dialed a zero, before you can dial the next number. And it's that extraordinary pace that I think in your industry must be so exciting, because you just kind of you're always shooting for the moon and getting there, in a lot of ways, in terms of what you're achieving.
And the thing that makes that whole narrative that you just shared, and we must be similar ages, by the way, Bob, because those were all the computers of my teens as well. So yeah, 486 was pretty cool, mate, to be fair. I think the thing that's interesting about this particular moment in human history that you and I find ourselves talking today, is you're right. Since PCs became a mega trend in the 80s, and then was still in the 90s, and then towards the end of the 90s, just about the time 486s were coming along, the internet started to become the next mega trend. And then probably 2009, 2010, mobile became the next mega trend, and then cloud became the next mega trend. And so what you saw was these tectonic shifts in the way that technology was delivered to users and consumers. And each of them happened a little bit quicker. You know, the PC one that ran for like 15 years as the main thing, 20 years maybe. And then internet was the main thing then for another 10, and then mobile was the main thing then for another few, and then cloud. So they're getting shorter between times, bigger in terms of their effect every time, but ultimately still really one continuum, which as of them getting better and faster and cheaper.
Mm.
The thing that's interesting right now is that at a glance, you could say that we are just in the opening foothills of another one of those technology megatrends, which is AI. And so, you know, it's mainframes and mid-range computers, PCs, internet, mobile, cloud, and now AI. I don't think that's right. I don't think AI is the next technology megatrend. I think AI is the next humanity level revolution, the last one being the industrial revolution. So we kind of went hunter gatherer, agricultural revolution, industrial revolution, AI. I think the one that we are currently in the foothills is one of those, not the next PC or the next internet, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I mean, I was going to come on and talk to you in a while about that in a bit more detail, actually, when we get kind of beyond your story, because I think it is. I've had a couple of AI specialists on the podcast over time, and it is very interesting, this whole dynamic around how big a difference it's going to make. So let's loop back to that in a bit. I think
Sure.
just on the pure technology thing, the other thing that really strikes me is I remember when I started flying the Jaguar, for example. The Jaguar was quite an advanced airplane for its time in terms of the technology in it, but its initial memory capability had an 8K computer. And the obviously when they sent the astronauts to the moon and Neil Armstrong walked on the moon in 1969, I mean, that was the same sort of thing. It was in tiny amounts of memory, and you look at nowadays, and you'd laugh at that. And I think my mobile phone's got something like 500 gigs of memory, and it's just extraordinary.
I happened to be rereading a book last night that I read years ago, and my kids bought me the updated copy of it for Christmas. So this is Bill Bryson's A Short History of Nearly Everything, and it's a really good book, and I love Bill Bryson. And so I was just rereading it, and he makes the comment that, is it the Voyager probes? I think there might be two Voyager probes that are the most distant man-made objects from the Earth, and maybe the fastest moving ones as well. They sailed past Pluto a few years ago.
Yeah.
They're only meant to last a few years, but they're still chugging along. Apparently, the amount of memory on the computers on those is less than in the fob for your gate on the front of your house.
Yeah, well, that says it all, doesn't it,
Yeah.
really? I mean, I do think, I mean, interestingly, I'd welcome your view on this. I do think there is a risk, though. If I look at, I mean, Microsoft's a great example of this, where the term was around a while ago, wasn't it? Bloatware, because essentially what had happened was, you've got more memory available, both in RAM terms and in storage terms. So actually what happens is your software starts to become very hungry in terms of memory and storage. And you certainly, I mean, I'm a Mac user, actually, but I see that now. Everything you download, it's in the gigabyte range of storage requirement, which is is that just because we've it's so much better, or is actually because we've got a bit less tight about the way we actually produce this stuff?
Both, but I mean, to be honest, I'd argue that the second one we've got less tight validly. So I mean, yeah, software is a lot more capable than what was on our Commodore Amigas or our Voyager space probes or our Saturn V rockets. And the fact that it takes many megabytes or gigabytes to download doesn't matter when you've got a 5G network and you can watch an HD video in real time from a moving aeroplane, right? So there's some technology stuff in there as well. So I mean, back in the day, going back to Jaguar fast jets and 60s, 70s, even 80s era space probes, the software was a lot closer to the hardware. So in many cases, the software would be specifically telling the hardware what to do directly. Whereas now, I always talk about this as everybody in the technology industry is standing on the shoulders of giants. So, there's no commercial or very few commercial programmers that are writing commercial software engineers that are writing software that directly controls a chip or directly controls how something is stored onto memory. There'll be a layer of software between the chip and the operating system, and then a layer of software between the operating system and the coder. And so the coder is asking to do something, and they're kind of picking off a bookshelf of things that were invented a few years ago that they can make use of. So the downside of that is, yeah, if they spent their whole lives optimizing exactly how their particular use case was optimized onto the compute or the storage, maybe they'd make it a little bit more efficient. But the equal and opposite reaction of that is they'd make a lot less progress. Now, in a world where most things still aren't digitized, what was your last experience like going to the doctor's surgery or to the hospital, for instance? Then I think the compulsion to digitize and make things better with software is far higher than the need to perfectly optimize for how compute and storage is used, especially since compute and storage is so incredibly powerful and incredibly cheap nowadays. And of course, networking bandwidth being the other one. So yeah, that would be my answer to that question, Bob.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting and very, very valid. I mean, I think we could spend hours talking about this, and I probably want to move on to something else. But I think your networking bandwidth point, certainly in the UK, but one of the challenges that I think is definitely still there is people being left behind on this. Not through their own fault. I mean, it's not because and I live out in the rural Sussex and I cannot get full fiber internet. It doesn't exist here. And so, I think on a good day we get like 26 megabits down, and and about 2 or 3 up, and that is going to be a challenge unless they. And I know the government's kind of aware of it, but they're sort of focused on getting 96% of the population or whatever up to there. Well, that means 4% of them are going to be in real trouble, and that's before you talk about age and people's familiarity and ability to use it and all the rest of it. So I do hope that there's a genuine approach that turns around and levels that playing field, because I think that's really difficult otherwise.
Yeah, agreed. Have you checked out Starlink or anything, or does that not work for you?
No, we could get Starlink. I think the challenge with Starlink is that you're paying for the data, of course, so you don't have unlimited amounts of download, upload, and all the rest of it. So, but certainly that may well be an option that I suppose starts to improve, particularly and inevitably it will improve itself, won't it? It will, it'll change, its business model will change, and all the rest of it. Hey, let's stick with you though. I mean, you mentioned at the very front end that, I mean, you're running a pretty significant sized company with with a large number of team members, as you described them, as within it. And I'm interested in leadership styles. And the core of the podcast is around leadership and people's abilities in and experiences as leaders. And I'm interested in how you have shifted and changed and consciously, unconsciously over time. I mean, you probably started leading nobody, like most of us do, and then you've grown into running a pretty big organization. So, from a personal leadership point of view, what's important to you? What have you taken along the way? How does that all work for you?
So, in terms of how long I've been doing leadership, because you're right, we all start leading ourselves. But a quirk of my career is that I've actually been leading people for quite a long time. So I mentioned that I did my first startup when I was 17, and I was a co-founder of that. I wasn't the original spark. There's a chap called Neil, but it was he and I that did it on the first day, and quite quickly we had some employees, and I managed them. So from the age of 17, actually, I've been managing and or leading people. And I'm 47 now, Bob. If we could cut that out on the edit, of course, I'd be grateful. But, so that's 30 years of leading teams when you're 47, which I occasionally reflect on. Oh yeah, I bet that passes the 10,000 hour rule, right? Like that is something I've just had a lot of time to practice at. And in terms of, am I any better at it today than I was back then? Goodness, I hope so, because I suspect, probably not unsurprisingly, as a 17-year-old, and then as a 22-year-old 5 years later, and then as a 27-year-old 5 years later at that, I probably wasn't that great at it back then. But also very consciously, I once heard a great line. Unfortunately, I can't remember who it's from. I think it was some financial dude, like a hedge fund manager. I think he might have been Australian, this guy. But anyway, the line went, I always want to be disgusted with the person that I was 2 years ago. I always thought that's a great line. And actually, I rightly or wrongly do try to live that. Maybe not consciously through that lens, but definitely I think if you were to ask me what is my biggest leadership skill, then I mean, being a modest British person, I would say, I'm not sure I have an amazing leadership skill, but if you were to keep pushing, Bob, I'd say one of them at least is kind of self-reflection and vulnerability and introspection, and always asking yourself, like, how can I have done that better? And problems, rolling them back up to you and figuring out why ultimately you were a cause of them or how you could have prevented them. And I think those things hopefully make you better over time. So there's some things that I imagine were probably emerging features of the way I try to approach leadership that maybe you could have found little tells of 30 years ago when I started doing this. There's always been a care and interest about human beings. There's always been an enjoyment about getting a team to do something greater than what it could do on its own. But also there's 30 years of trying to learn how to get better at it, and just being a student of that, if that makes sense.
No, it absolutely does. That's really interesting, and I love the edit out the 47. And what I'm linking back to is you saying a minute ago that we're a similar age, because I'm 63. So
Oh,
yeah.
well, you're aging well, mate. You're aging well.
So I'm very flattered by that. So I definitely won't cut 47 out of the edit.
Fair play.
No, brilliant. I think the whole topic of leadership, because we all learn. I mean, I regularly talk about picking up stuff from other people, and things that have gone well for me, things that haven't gone so well for me, things that I've seen other people do that I like or don't like, and building those into my own kind of approach. So I think the being disgusted with yourself 2 years ago, the person you were 2 years ago, is a very good quote. I hadn't heard that before. But I think you need to be in that evolution space, don't you? You want to be continuing to develop, because for me as well, if you're too autocratic as a leader in any field, and one of the things I do when I train people these days is I say, look, you've been promoted into whatever it is you do and gone up the ladder because you're good at something. That doesn't mean you stay being absolutely the person that has to do all of that as you get better at it. Because if you're continuing to think I'm the only one that can do this in this particular way, and you don't empower the people, you don't delegate enough, and you don't develop the people underneath you, then inevitably your leadership reputation won't be that great from the people underneath you either. You might be very successful, but it's not necessarily that helpful in terms of the people you're developing. So it's always a really interesting debate in terms of how you move it.
On that one, Bob, I don't know if this is right or not, but one thing I've always thought is there's different leadership styles that may or may not be successful, I guess, in different situations. And also, we as humans often we have strengths and weaknesses. And so a trick of leadership perhaps is knowing your strengths and covering your weaknesses, either through learning and self-improvement, through processes, or normally as you scale, through people that are good at the things that you're not good at. So I think there are some things that I probably am, compared to the average bear nowadays, pretty good at. So I think a really important aspect of leadership, when the situation is that you're trying to change something. And an entrepreneurial business, you're trying to change something. You're not trying to run something steady state. You're trying to take a problem and solve it. You're trying to take something from that didn't exist that does exist. It's why management training often doesn't work that well for entrepreneurialism, because management training is about running a business model, whereas entrepreneurialism is about creating a business model. In that situation, one thing I think is an important skill is storytelling. Um, it scales really well, and it gives everyone a shared sense of purpose and mission. It's useful in a wide variety of situations. It makes customers want to be part of your story. It makes potential team members want to join your team. It makes investors want to invest. So storytelling, that's something that I think I'm reasonably good at and have got good at over time and have tried to polish and improve. And assembling a team as well. I think there's aspects of it, well, definitionally, there's aspects of it that I still need to get better at and will continue to, and never quite reach 10 out of 10, I'm sure. But there's other aspects of it that I've gotten somewhat competent about: assembling a world-class team, giving that team the environment to succeed, building a great culture within that team. So things like that, I think I'd back myself to be pretty good at, in sort of global Darwinian race of how good you are at those things. There's other things that I'm just not as good at. And so in those situations, when you're a team of one, you have to work really hard to just force yourself to do the work. And then when you get a little bit better, you probably have to build personal processes around making yourself better. An example being, I think I'm lucky enough to have one of the best executive assistants in the country. Like, she is amazing. She's called Laura. Most people know her better than they know me. That's necessary. Like, I'm not naturally a super organized guy, so I had to find an amazing assistant, had to build an amazing relationship with her, because I'm covering the blind side on something that I'm weaker at. And then later, once you get to a scale business, there's no law that says I'm going to be the best person at scaling go-to-market teams in the world. I need a CRO for that. No rule that says I'm going to be the best manager of a scaled software engineering team. I need someone that's better at that than me. Same for all the other roles. In fact, probably need someone that's better at actually running a steady state business than me, and that's my CFO and COO. So, it's a combination. I think you have to recognize what you're good at, and I think some business models or organizational constructs probably need or reward some leadership styles better than others, and those things probably change over time as well.
No, I love it. So many great points in there. I particularly resonate with the storytelling one, because that, for me personally, that's also something I do a lot when I'm speaking or when I'm training. I think if you can make it relevant and bring it to life through a story, that has so much more power than just basically laying out stuff as a kind of factual. This is the way to do it. And I think the other thing that just picking up between the lines a little bit, what you said there, is this whole management versus leadership bit. And I tend to be very simplistic about it, and I say, look, management is about process, leadership is about inspiration. And that's not to say that if you're a leader, you don't necessarily need to be a good manager. And many leaders are extremely good managers, but equally, some of them are not that good, and they recognize that, and therefore they find ways to fill in the gaps, just as you've been describing. But I think if you can't inspire people as a leader, you will always struggle, because you're going to find it very, very difficult to actually motivate people, bring new people in, to your point, get investors, all that kind of thing. So I think, yeah, you're making some brilliant points in there, really helpful.
Now, there's I don't know if our conversation will drift this way, Bob, but if you ask me, when I'm looking at my own business, at other people's businesses, at other CEOs or people they have working for them, or just in wider public discourse, in society at large, in politics, in public sector, what for me is the anti-pattern of what good looks like, and it's failing to lead. Because people need leading through things. And if you can lead, you can get yourself through, almost any situations. But a lot of the time when you look at it, I mean, I think this is the problem in many ways with late stage Western society. It's a vacuum of leaders and a vacuum of leadership. And life and business and anything worthwhile, it has discomfort, it has challenge, it has strife, it has obstacles that need to be overcome. You don't manage your way around those things, you lead your way through those things. And so I say this at work all the time. It's like, what's the most important thing of leadership? And I just go, leading.
Yeah. No,
Remember to do that.
I'm so totally with you on that. In fact, I wrote a post about this just at the turn of the year where I was saying, leaders are paid to lead and leaders are paid to make decisions. And I think too often we're in a position now, whether it's in the political space or in wider business space, where people want to and strive to seek consensus, which is not a bad thing. I'm not saying you should be autocratic at all, but I think you have to then bear in mind that even if you're taking the views of lots of people and seeking to get a consensus, if you can get it, that's wonderful. But if you can't, then ultimately, if you're in charge, you're the one that's paid to make a decision and stick with it and lead the team through it. And there are too many people who are too reluctant to do that these days, and that's not helpful.
Yeah, it's really about the decision. It's about the making it, isn't it? I mean, you can decide to, do your bombing run from the west or do your bombing run from the east, or you can decide to enter market X or market Y. I would argue that a lot of the time, 90% of it is just picking one of those, committing to it and executing against it, rather than one is necessarily optimum over the other. I mean, we perhaps shouldn't dwell on this too long unless you want to, but I don't think it's as simple as just finding consensus. I think it's two things, actually. I think it's not wanting to exhibit the personal bravery to make the decisions. And secondly, I think it's a function of the class of leaders that society generates. I mean, if you put people that have spent their entire life managing and administrating and managing risk into positions of power, then what do you expect to get? Or if you get people that only are there because they want popularity and power, then what do you expect to get? And that, unfortunately, is what our systems in broader society are kind of set up to do at the moment. So, but yeah, all that comes back down, sort of, rather than turning into a bashing session of late stage Western democracies, bringing it back to leadership. For me, the most important thing in leadership is leading. And I suppose if you then go just one step further into what we've unpacked there, it's about making decisions, it's about bravery. As I think about leadership, those are some of the words that come across my mind.
No, I totally agree with that. I think again, we will move on, but the personal courage bit is kind of where I was going, because I think that's the problem. People are too keen to seek and try and get a collective decision, which they can then turn around and say, well, it wasn't all mine. Whereas actually having the courage to turn around and go, this was my decision, and whether whether it was a success or a failure, I own it. That's completely where I think we're completely like-minded on that. I totally agree.
You got time for one more point on that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, go on.
So the when we're looking for people to join my company, and it's advice I've given to other people as well for what it's worth. Our industry is it has a lot of fun stuff to do with it. You can make a bunch of money, you can travel the world, and fundamentally what we do is create things out of nothing, turn them into a product, give them to customers, make the customer's life better. That's all really fun. On the flip side, though, insanely competitive, very, very ambitious, fast moving. It's not a place to sit around the campfire singing Kumbaya to each other. You'll just get eaten if you do that. And so when we're looking for people to join the company as individual contributors or as leaders, we tend to look not just for the domain expertise, do they know how to do this, but we look for the core instincts of the person as well. And one of the things I always look for myself and advise others to look for is what I call sport, academia, or strive. And so sport, at some point in their life, have they played hopefully reasonably high performance team sport? Academia, have they gotten to a senior level of the academic ladder where they've had to take personal risk against, for instance, proving or disproving something at their PhD? Or Strive, have they faced genuine obstacles in their life that they've had to overcome? And the reason I always look for those three things is because all of them signal that kind of personal grit and determination around taking risk, around carrying on going. In sport, you've had to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to go training for years when it's windy and cold. You've gotten beaten in your 100 meters attempts or in your game of soccer or rugby, and you've still turned up the next week, and then you've learned to win together. So sport, really good indicator. Academia, my cousin actually, he sat in a laboratory for years. And the way he tells the story, I'm sure there's more to it than this, but he just like pressed the button on the side of an experiment, wrote down the answer for years. And then at the end of it, having like not spoken to another member of the human race for 3 years, turned out he was wrong. And that's common in academia, right? So anyone that's willing to commit themselves to that, there's a certain level of resilience. And then strife, same. If someone has overcome big personal hurdles in life, then it is often equip them with the skills. And all of those three things for me can be signals of superpowers in leadership, because they give you the things that you need: the grit, the personal resilience, and the bravery. And oftentimes the bravery required in the moment in leadership seems trivial compared to the things that you've done previously.
No, again, three great examples of areas. I mean, I think the one I talk about quite a lot as well, and it's where I leverage obviously the military bit a bit, is training and development in this, because I think so few organizations actually do leadership development training as part of what they do. Most people, they're hired or promoted on the basis of their qualifications, their skills, their performance in the business, and that's all about, with a lot of organizations, have they done what's been asked of them, not how they've led people and led their teams. And the military example is, I'm certainly not going to advocate the military are brilliant at leadership all the time. I've worked with some terrible military leaders, and I've also worked with some brilliant ones. But I think what it does do very well is it does train people very well, and it gives them a good foundation, B, and then lots and lots of through career development and lots of opportunities to actually lead. Where you're running big teams. So and it plays to your kind of strife point, I suppose, a little bit, because it puts you in really challenging situations some of the time where you absolutely is literally life or death, and and you've got to make decisions, and you've got to get through that and take the team with you. Because if you've done it badly the first time, those that are left with you the second time will have a different view of your leadership by the time you get to that. So, really, really important. Hey, let's move on, because as you say, we'll get down too far down the rabbit hole at this point. Just stick with you personally for a few more minutes, though. But when you look back now through your career with everything you've done, if you were going back to just before you did your first startup and were advising yourself, on what to do with your life, is there anything you'd be advising different to what you've already done, or any top tips you'd be offering to yourself?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if you could magically go back to that 17-year-old version of yourself with all the knowledge that you've got today, then even if you didn't just simply use that knowledge to, buy Bitcoin, but you just applied the business building playbook that you'd learned now, then that life and possibly the world would end up very different, because taking 30 years of quite privileged, and by privileged I mean lucky, to have learned so much leadership experience and installing them in someone who was 17 in the late 90s, my goodness, what a potent weapon that person would have been, because you had so much opportunity and you had the playbook installed. But that's not really a fair game. That's like saying, wouldn't it be great if I knew the lottery numbers before Saturday, right? And so I think your point is, like, what's a piece of advice? And for me, I think it's a piece of advice that I wish I'd learned earlier, and that's probably the value of integrity, really. And so, thankfully, it didn't take too long for me to fully learn this. I think I probably fully learned it by my mid-20s. But prior to that, I don't think I really understood the value of integrity. And nowadays, I would say to myself, to my children, to other people, to employees, like, just remember, this is the one currency in the world that you can earn, but you can never spend it, because once you've spent it, you can't earn it back. It's not like a reservoir that you can refill up over time. When I was 17 and, asked by one of my sixth form masters why I hadn't done my homework, and told them, because the dog ate it, or, all those situations where, you should have done something but didn't, and didn't take personal accountability for it. Um, you know, that those things, if I could go back and give myself one piece of advice, I think it'd be around that. But thankfully for me, I had some positive influences in my life through my 20s that kind of taught me it. And I think maybe, I mean, maybe when I was younger, the fact that I hadn't yet learned all of those things, uh, um, were perhaps a reflection of, I hadn't yet found the people to teach them to me. And I don't like saying that, because that's kind of making the system and the world to blame, which is never a useful thing. So I'm not doing that, really. But I'm really glad and feel really lucky that by the time I was getting to my late 20s, and therefore into my marriage, and I hadn't yet founded Matillion, which would happen in my early 30s. But I'm really glad, before that, those being, along with having children, the three most important things that have happened in my life to date, I'm really glad that I'd learned that by then. Does that make sense?
It does absolutely make sense. Yeah, and I think the role models piece is so important as well, isn't it, along the way, and in terms of having the right people that shape you. And some of those can be, obvious ones like family, parents, etc. But the other ones do come through what you do, and in personal life and professional life, and you can be lucky or unlucky with the way that turns out. And I think there's the whole nature nurture debate is interesting in this, isn't it? Because there's no doubt nurture plays a big part in this for people who are successful, if they've got the right opportunities with the right people supporting them.
100%.
I always try and talk about highs and lows, because I think every leader has got those. And first sort of related point, I suppose, to that is, when you look backwards, is there anything that you wish you had done differently? And if so, what is it?
I mean, there is 1,000 things that I look back and wish I'd done differently with the benefit of hindsight. But there actually aren't that many things, that I wish I'd done differently. Uh, Asking the test, could I have made a better decision at the time, knowing what I knew and with the expertise that I had at that moment? If I look back across that, which is quite a liberating thing to do, there's not that many things where I think to myself, oh yeah, I got that really wrong and I should have known better at the time. And then, also, if I look at how life's worked out so far, um, uh, I've gotten to work with, meet, lead, partner with, just the most incredible people that, I never would have originally, predicted that I'd have been able to. Um, uh, Being an entrepreneur and CEO, I mean, first of all, for the record, I don't think it's an easy way to make money. So, and it is, I think, yeah, uh, it's a pretty difficult way to earn money. It's a thankless job. It takes a very long time. You're working all the time, and usually stuff is going wrong all the time, to a greater or lesser extent. So the reason I'm saying that is, I think sometimes it can come across as glamorous and like easy and privileged. And just in case anyone is thinking of becoming, an entrepreneur CEO for that reason, don't, because it's hellish for years. But it's still an incredible privilege. And so I have no regrets at all about choosing this as my career. And I feel incredibly privileged and lucky and happy to do it. But if you're asking about low points, I mean, we're going to need another podcast, Bob, because there's plenty of those, mate.
What's the lowest of the lows then?
So, I mean, in a company like mine at my stage, I'm now at a lucky situation where I've got lots of clever, hardworking people that work for and with me. And the reason I mention that is that means that nothing makes it to my desk. That is easy. And in fact, knowing whether things are going well, I actually say this in the business from time to time, it's more like evaluating a scatter plot. Are good news dots on the scatter plot today outweighing bad news plots on the scatter plot? It's never that everything's good or everything's bad. And you can feel yourself making the folly of saying, oh, everything's going great, because you know that within an hour, something will have come along and messed that up. But yeah, low points. I have to be a little bit careful about talking about some of them because I'm still the CEO of the company,
Sure,
and
sure. Yeah.
it's possible team members, customers, investors will be listening. But we've had a couple of pivots and rebuilds in our company's history. Necessarily, the company's 15 years old. The industry moves faster than that, and I would say the most difficult times are the when those pivots are going on, but before they have delivered, because they might be a multi-year job. Just getting to the knitting of what we do for a minute. We as a company spent about 10 years making software technology tools for a job role called a data engineer. And so if you imagine a data engineer was a bricklayer, we're making trowels for the bricklayers to use. We got pretty good at that. Data engineers and data engineering teams all around the world use our technology. But the product that we kind of got famous with, it was beginning to reach the end of its popularity in the market. There's still loads of people who use it. It's still a very good product, but getting new customers or getting customers that were using it to expand, it was just starting to look like the 2015 BMW rather than the 2025, right? And so we needed to make a decision about what to do about that. Classically, you can sell the company to someone. That's actually a common way to resolve that problem, and your product just becomes a feature and solve it that way. You can completely rebuild the product. As a growth stage company like ours, that's a very, very challenging thing to do. You can move into a new market, but you're going to have to do something. Otherwise, your product's just going to get less and less popular over time. So we decided to completely rebuild the product. And just as we were doing it, the market kind of shifted a bit. First of all, with macros, second half of 2022, post-COVID supply chain contraction, plus war in Europe, creates energy shock, makes inflation, makes interest rates go up, makes life hard for many companies, particularly technology companies and their customers. So you have a macro shock. The way customers purchase software started changing in response to that shock. We were halfway through building our next generation platform, and then AI comes along, right? So it took us probably 3 to 4 years to go through that transition. Now, every quarter we grew a lot less quickly than we'd like to at the time. Every quarter we became more profitable. But that was a very hard period in the company's life, because as CEO and as my leadership team, you're having to keep all the people that work for you on the bus of the mission at a time when the weather's cold and the work is hard. All the investors, who, by the way, are seeing these things happening across their portfolios, and so they're all in a bad mood anyway. And they're sort of saying, well, ultimately what they're saying is, why can't you just magically grow faster like we were doing previously, right? Customers are saying, hey, we're on this old product, but really we'd like something new. And we're like, yeah, we're building it, but it's still several years away, so stay on the bus. So really, everyone is in some way doubting you from time to time, sometimes a lot, sometimes a little. And it goes back to that bravery, grit, and maybe storytelling bit. You are just repetitively having to keep everyone on track, despite the fact the data at the y-intercept is not supportive of the story you're telling. So if you then plot that curve out, if that is a 6 month transformation, the worst time is month 5, right? Because you're the deepest into it without delivering. If it's a 4-year one, the worst time is year 3.5. And sure enough, in my career, having been through a couple of those would be the times I say feel the worst. And what you have to do is you just have to dig in and like keep saying it, you're going to get through it, and keep making the hard decisions. And ultimately, I would say there's a lot of leadership quality in just keep turning up. So yeah, that and then other one, anything where it's to do with personal pain or suffering is obviously a very different type of thing, but those ones are difficult. I know you'll have experienced plenty of this in your career. But yeah, if you manage a few hundred people, stuff happens. People die, people get cancer, people's kids have horrible things happening to them, and those are always difficult to deal with as well.
Yeah, 100%. No, really, really interesting and very helpful as well. And you sort of segued beautifully into where I want to go next, actually, because you touched on Maya, your new product, and we've touched on AI a little bit as well. But I guess just interested in the story and where you're going with it, and tell us a bit more about it.
Oh, well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to. We're incredibly excited about it. So Maya is an AI technology, a genuine AI technology, in a world where a lot more people today are talking about it than doing it. It's a technology that's actually turning up and doing it. And so if we go back to a couple of things that we've already discussed during our time together today, the first one was, I think I posited grandly earlier, Bob, that AI wasn't the next technology megatrend, it's the next industrial revolution. And the reason for that is it displaces how and changes how people work. And so once upon a time, we were hunter-gatherers, finding big mammals and berries, and then we figured out how to plant fields, and it changed how we work. And we had the agricultural revolution, because we had to stay in the same place, towns and cities grew, etc. And then we had the industrial revolution, where suddenly to scale a process, you didn't scale the people anymore, you scaled the machines. And then really, we've not really had another one of those. Like it's just been a continuum, but AI is the next one of those. Certainly in my opinion, but I don't think that's in any way a unique opinion, because suddenly the work that yesterday only humans could do can now be done by machines, by AIs, and by agents. And so if you think back to what we spent 10 years doing, which is providing tools that data engineers use, well, what is Maya? Maya is providing digital data engineers. And so the bricklayer example doesn't quite work here, does it? But we're no longer providing the trowel to the bricklayer, we're providing the trowel and the bricklayer. And if you set that against the context of business and their need for data, that's quite the profound thing. Data for me, a metaphor that I've always found useful to describe what data is like for businesses and organizations is quite like what iron and steel are like to the world and humanity, right? So iron and steel, there is no shortage on planet Earth of iron ore. Right? The core of Earth is made of iron, and there's plenty of iron ore. And for many hundreds of years, human beings turned iron ore into steel in a very artisanal way. They'd have a couple of guys with a bloomery burning some charcoal that they'd in turn made from trees. And, this process that took 2 or 3 weeks and was very artisanal and required special skills and years of learning through apprenticeship would produce enough steel to maybe make a few swords or a few spear tips. And then the Industrial Revolution came along, and we figured out how to make a blast furnace and like rollers and stuff. And suddenly we could make so many new things. With steel, we could make ships and bridges and buildings and other machines, and the world changed in a very positive way. Not because the raw material had become more available, but our ability to turn the raw material into useful products had been something that we could scale to machine scale. It's exactly the same with data. Every business and organization is awash with data, and they are unable to put most of it to use because the way that we refine data from iron ore into steel is human scale and artisanal, just like those bloomeries back in the days of the Iron Age. And so what AI allows us to do is kind of invent the blast furnace for data, right? That we can take a machine scale need for data and match it up with a machine scale ability to refine it. And that's what Maya is. Maya is a digital data team. Specifically, we call the category that Maya is leading AI data automation. But it's the idea that you are no longer constrained by the number of human beings in your data team as to how much work you can do. Because if you want one agent, you can have one. If you want 100, you can have 100, and they work 24 hours a day. And we're at that time when there's, a discomfort, I think, in us human beings that, well, they'll never be as good as me, are they? But no, they won't be as good at some things. They're already a lot better at other things. And so we can deliver these spectacular outcomes for our customers, where they're able to go faster, spend the same or less, do incredible new things. Most importantly, do it at machine scale, matching up to the machine scale need. That's what Maya's all about.
Nice. And I mean, you've opened up a number of threads for discussion on this around because your analogy around industrial revolution and then AI is the next kind of big revolution for humanity. That's absolutely consistent with a couple of other people I've talked to about this. One, I remember a conversation vividly with a chap called Steve Brown, who's a Brit but lives in America these days and has been steeped in this for ages. And I said to him, okay, we've had the industrial revolution, we've had the internet, we've had mobile phones. Where's kind of AI in this scale? He said, no. It's kind of, if you think of it, it's more like electricity. That was his analogy. Essentially it's that transformational for the world, probably more so. And actually, another chap that I've talked to about it has said, electricity is way too small. It's much bigger than that. So you're definitely playing in that kind of space with this. So, allied to that, then, in terms of the conversation around AI, and I always try and tap into the kind of more general view of experts like you on this, where you're working in this all the time, that there is this sort of societal view on one level that this is the worst thing ever, because actually what it's going to do is the Terminator scenario. The machines are going to get cleverer than we are. They're going to decide we don't need to exist, blah, blah, blah. Or even at a more modest level than that, it's going to just strip away thousands and thousands or millions of jobs, and therefore, what are people going to do with their lives? Whereas the other end of the scale is obviously, no, it's transformational. It's going to augment capability. It's going to do lots and lots of positive things. And I'm kind of interested in where you sit on that, because commercially, obviously, any organization is going to look for efficiencies and more profitability. And if they can do stuff quicker, faster, with less people, and all the inevitable challenges that people bring, and you alluded to some of those a minute ago, I mean, that's human nature, that things happen. Those happen a lot less if you're dealing with something that's a machine as opposed to a person. So I'm just interested in what your take is on AI more generally, and where all that goes, and where the threats and opportunities are.
Yeah, great conversation, Bob. So the Terminator 2000, the AIs, decide human beings are an inconvenience, and our legacy tech. I don't know. I will tell you that's not the thing that keeps me up at night. And certainly technology that I can see today, that you can see today, is nowhere near capable of doing that. Um, uh, these things are spectacularly clever, but not at everything. And so now, what I don't know and what you don't know is what's behind the doors of the AI labs. My guess, personally, is that what's behind the doors of the AI labs is incrementally better than what we can see today. But that's purely a guess. I don't know. Maybe they have got AGI level or super AGI level models going already that could take over the world and exterminate humanity. But of the things that you laid out, sir, that's not the one that I spend my time thinking about. I do think there are some like proper AI risks, but I think they're more about, giving bad actors that are human incredible tools to do bad things. And so those things need safeguarding against carefully. I mean, to state the obvious, we obviously don't want someone who's got a gripe with planet Earth with access to an LLM that tells he or she how to build a chemical weapon, for instance. Like, that'd be bad. But the much more interesting side of the conversation for me is, that kind of what happens when an industrial revolution turns up, because that technology, that's not pie in the sky. That is there today. Um, uh, and the only reason that there isn't more disruption so far, one is I think there is. I think it's just not being reported fully yet. It's just like this week, there's an article in the Financial Times today about how labor productivity has doubled in the US over the last year. And that's the first time they can see strong signal coming out. Like, the number of jobs is going down, but the productivity is going up. It's in the FT this morning. But so I think you are starting to see it. But also, like, think about when the printing presses turned up. Like, the Vandals smashed the printing presses, didn't they? And we as human beings, we do tend to resist things that are going to change our lives, particularly if they are going to, directly impact our lives by changing the nature of our job or removing the current job that we do. I mean, crikey, look at electric cars. I mean, electric cars to the educated mind seem fairly uncontroversial, right? It's just a car that's quieter, doesn't pollute as much, accelerates much faster, needs less servicing, and you never have to take it to the gas station because you top it up on home. And yeah, they're like a political hot potato that we reject based on culture wars, right? That's just a car. Imagine if it's your career. No AI is going to do it better than me. And so I think whether that's as an individual, as a corporation, or as a nation state, it's the thing that will be interesting to play out is how quickly you move from like AI denier or AI ignoramus through to AI embracer. And there will be collateral damage through that, just like there was in the Industrial Revolution, when it used to be a lovely cottage industry of people spinning wool in front of the fire, and they didn't make much wool and they didn't get paid very well for it, but it is what paid for their children's meals at the end of the week. And then someone installs a spinning jenny next to the water wheel at the river at the end of town, and you don't get to do that anymore. And in the short run, that causes a lot of pain to a lot of people's lives. I think that is exactly what AI will do. Now, generally speaking, it has been the case that on the other side of these technology transformations, human beings find something else to do, something higher order, something only AI can do. And none of us would really fancy a job hand spinning or hand weaving cotton or wool anymore, right? We quite like the machines do it, but there's a transitional period where we have to get used to it, where there's a huge amount of displacement of labor. And then the thing that's different this time with AI around that displacement of labor piece is, and this sounds like a really sort of, I don't know, almost classist thing to say, which is not my intention. It's just an economic point that I'm making, but it's white collar work that it displaces. And the only thing about white collar work is it earns a lot more money, right? So it's a lot more human labor displaced at the business end of how exchequers fill their coffers and of how retailers who they sell their products to. So, I mean, a software engineer might, on average, straight out of university in the UK, a decent one probably earn £60,000 per year plus. A good one, that will be a 6-digit salary comfortably, with 5 to 10 years of experience. You only need to take one of those out to economically cancel out the equivalent of 3 average salaries, right? So it's just more potent, economically speaking, if that's the labor that you're displacing. And the key point I'm making about this, which I'll make on my final point before we sort of go off in a different direction or discuss it more, is this is today's technology. And so the delay isn't the tech. The delay is companies, teams, organizations, and societies' willingness and progress on deploying the tech. But I mean, I'll say something controversial. I probably trust going to see a foundation model powered general practitioner, family doctor, as much as I would a human one today. I go to the doctor like I'm sure you do from time to time, Bob. I like my doctor. He's a good bloke. He's called Bruce. I'm sure he went to a good university, but I just know what the job of a family doctor is, and I know how good at doing that job a frontier model is. And I trust the frontier model as much as the human one. Maybe not more, but as much. That's today's technology, and that's something incredibly sensitive, like my relationship with my doctor. So, roll that out 2, 3, 4, 5 years, 10 years. That's definitely the Industrial Revolution. There is huge displacement of labor, huge need for people to retrain. And the best way to personally equip yourself for it, I think, is the same way as it was at every other one of these mega trends. It's to be open-minded and agile and go to where the puck is going. It's not to be a vandal and smash the printing presses. That will work in the very short run, but not in the long run.
Yeah, brilliant answer. We could talk about this for hours. I'm very conscious that you don't have hours, so we will move on. Yeah, such an interesting area, and I'm sure something that's going to continue to be debated for a long time. There's two quick questions that I always kind of conclude with on these, and the first of those is, what's the most memorable event of your life so far?
Memorable event of my life so far. I mean, I'm lucky to be a father of two lovely daughters. So the births of my children, of course, my wedding day to my beautiful wife, who I'm sure is going to catch on at some point, but so far seems to be willing to remain married to me, which is excellent. Very grateful to her. But when you're building a company, actually, you are so focused on the dials on the dashboard and the road ahead that it's very easy to never look out of the side windows and take in the view. And so, but occasionally life comes along and manufactures an opportunity where you can do that. And particularly as a software company where you don't make anything you can necessarily hold, right? You can use it and you can see it, but you can't hold it. It's not physical. Then manufacturing those moments where something happens, they generate memorable moments. So there's been a few of those. People always assume it's the unicorn round, and that was a moment, probably more so for my colleagues than for me. For me, it was signing a piece of paper at 4 o'clock in the morning on my own, actually in this room that I'm speaking to you from, because it was during the pandemic. But for everybody else in the company, that one was a huge validation and that made that memorable. For me, actually, it was probably the first time we raised Silicon Valley institutional money because I was like, oh, right, the best companies in the world walk up and down the Sand Hill Road, convince them to raise capital. And it's a heck of a test. The odds are exceptionally thin of having gotten one of those. So raising capital from Silicon Valley investors, first of all, it allowed me to start running the business and my life properly in a way that I could pay myself a proper salary and my colleagues. We could have a proper office. We could start to compete with competitors properly rather than being this little upstart from Manchester that had to stick another 10 pence in the meter every time to try and compete. But almost more so, it was like the validation, like, oh my goodness, myself and my co-founder Ed, the small early team that we've built, Peter McCord, of course, one of our co-founders that well, Bob, like the three of us going from like an idea and a sort of low rent version of a WeWork in a village no one has heard of called Knutsford to walking down the Sand Hill Road and successfully raising capital and being off to the races. That one for me was a huge moment. And then finally, just for fun, I'll just mention it is weird for anyone listening to this, considering a career in technology or advising their children on a career in technology. I think people, maybe less so nowadays, but they certainly used to have a view of working in tech as nerdy, and sitting in the basement writing code and putting computers together. Some of the incredible things that I've gotten to do as a byproduct of my job. I mean, I'm actually off to Downing Street after speaking to you. So that's cool. And whenever I get invited, I always go because I always think they might not invite me forever. And, like going to amazing places, meeting amazing people. We have an office in Denver. The mayor of Denver rang us up one day and said, "Oh, Matthew, would you like to come down to this thing at the airbase?" I'm like, "What's going on?" And he said, "The British Red Arrows are coming to town and they want British CEOs to turn up." Yeah, someone might have even been there, Bob. So I'm like sat doing a fireside chat with Red One in Denver. As
Nice.
like, so yeah, like amazing things that this career gives you the opportunity to do.
Yeah, that's a fantastic answer. So many things that are in there. I mean, the very last question is always a tricky one for a lot of people, but it's what's the most difficult question you've ever been asked?
It's the sting in the tail, this, Bob. You told me this was coming, and the cliched answer, but maybe accurate, would be to say this one, wouldn't it?
You're not the first.
Yeah, I won't leave it at that because that'd be boring. I'll tell you what I find really difficult, actually. I don't know if it's the most difficult question I've been asked, but I find it difficult to say no to opportunities sometimes. Um, there's a few things in and around Manchester, which is the city I'm from. I'm extremely proud of. I'm really proud and excited to see its renaissance and even be a small part of its renaissance, I suppose, of late. It's great. I love it. I love the fact that more Londoners are coming to live in Manchester than vice versa. Um, but as part of that, I've been asked to do a couple of things with Manchestery institutions. One of which I took up the board member role at Manchester University, which is an incredible privilege. But there's been a couple more that I've just been like, I'm really sorry, I just can't do it. I don't have time, and I find those really difficult. And then the only other thing I could think, like hardest questions that I've been asked, are almost the everyday questions that we ask of ourselves in business building. Because if it was easy, then someone would have already done it. And so almost all of the things that we work on in our day jobs, and I don't just mean inventing the product, although I do mean that, but every aspect of it, building the go-to-market team, finding and servicing the customers, allocating the capital, making the decisions, it's all hard, and it's all made with only a small percentage of the requisite information at breakneck speed. So in some ways, what's the hardest question I've been asked? All of them, because I think that's the nature of entrepreneurialism.
Brilliant. Matthew, you've been really, really generous with your time. I know you've got to go, not least to Downing Street, obviously, but yeah, thank you very, very much indeed. I really appreciate it. Fascinating conversation. Take care.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
I really hope you've enjoyed this conversation with Matthew Scullion. I think a guy who's clearly immensely successful in all that he does. He's done a terrific job, and he's got so many great insights. It was a real privilege to have a chance to chat to him at such length, and I'm extremely grateful to him for freeing up the time to do that. If you've enjoyed it, as always, please share it. Please push it around to other people so that other people get to benefit from it. Please ensure that you subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, or indeed follow and /subscribe on whatever podcast platform you're actually listening to, if you're listening to it rather than watching it, because that really does help to boost the podcast and get the ratings, which is important to making sure it progresses further. If you really like it and you find it valuable, then think about that subscription thing through Patreon, because that will make a world of difference to what I do. It doesn't cost very much. Cup of coffee probably a month is what you're buying me, and for that I'll be immensely grateful, because it really does help to keep the podcast going. So you just simply go to the support the show link in your podcast platform, or indeed in the show notes for YouTube. That'll take you to www.patreon.com And when you get there, then you just sign up as either a supporter, a champion, or a patron of the show. And any one of those is really, really good news for me. So I would be hugely grateful if you're a serial listener and you're enjoying what I provide. Would you pay for it? If you would pay for it, then please turn around and think about just doing that little donation. That would really help on a monthly basis. Thanks ever so much, though, as ever. Really enjoy you listening anyway, or watching if you're watching, and look forward to seeing you again very soon. All the very best. Bye-bye now.